Welcome back, everybody. In our last video, we showed you the viability section of the Vestega Feasibility app, which took you through the outputs of the automated residual land value appraisal that was run for a site in Camden Town. In this video, we're going to take you through the analytics section, which will set out a lot of the data information that went into that automated residual land value appraisal. So we'll start in the Site Info tab. This tab is going to set out a lot of the site-specific and local area information that is useful to know, the first of which being the site location information. This will set out information like the site area, the nearest postcode, whether or not it's in a built-up area, the ward, the district, and so forth, with a few other pieces of key information like the P-tile rating, which is London-specific, but will be quite important in working out the P-tile density matrix, the broad rental market area, which will indicate which local housing allowance rate will be applicable for a 1, 2, 3, or 4-bed unit, whether or not it's near an arterial road, which again will play into the P-tile density matrix calculation, as well as the unique property reference numbers found within the site boundary. So 22 are found, and when connected to the EPC database, that totaled 877 square meters of existing space. There's also a GIS table, which will set out flood zone information, conservation area, environmentally sensitivity areas, any listed buildings within the site boundary, and so forth. There's a town center table, which will show any nearby town centers. So in this instance, there's a major town center titled Camden Town within 28 meters, as well as Kentish Town, which is a district town center approximately 430 meters away from the site location. And then we have some rail stations that are within a close distance. So Camden Road being the closest at 525 meters. The rest of this section is going to set out some local area information, such as the tenure types, so a split between owned, rented private, rented social, and then some flat versus houses and some flat and house information. So we move into the flat value section. In this section, we work out what the estimated new build sales value for a market unit is, as well as the rental information and capitalized value estimates for affordable tenures. We primarily use land registry and EPC databases to do this, as well as a small number of other databases. So the first table is going to look at what the estimated new build sales value is. Now, this is a little bit different from what the average residential value is in the neighborhood, because new builds will typically exceed non-new build units with a premium typically attached to them. So what our algorithm does is it works really hard to figure out what that premium is. So it uses a combination of actual new build data, if it's nice and close by, but also uses non-new build data and applies a non-new build premium based on land registry information that we use and then integrate into the algorithm. So for this site, we've estimated a new build sales rate of £10,240 per square meter. Now, the sales rate by geography graph will take that rate and benchmark it against the average found in Camden, the average in London, and the average in England. We then have an annual flat price index taken from the Land Registry Property Price Index. This will show a year-on-year view of how flat prices have moved for Camden, London, and England, as well as a cumulative flat price index to the right. We then take rental information from the ONS database, which provides lower quartile, median, and upper quartile rents, and use that in combination with the land registry and EPC databases to then estimate what the new build rents would be for a 1, 2, 3, and 4-bed flat, and the resulting yield, which is 3.96% in this instance. We then access a number of other databases to work out what the rental estimates would be for other affordable tenures. So for instance, London Living Rents, which is a London-specific tenure, is taken from a database provided by the GLA. The local housing allowance rate is taken from the VOA database based on the broad rental market area. The London affordable rents is rental amount is in a rate applicable across London, and the cap target rent, otherwise known as the formula rent, is actually a calculation or a formula provided by the government that takes into account a number of factors, primarily being the location of the site and the estimated new build sales value for a unit. In the right-hand column, we will indicate what the percentage of the estimated new build market rent that represents. So the highest in this case is the affordable rent, which is 80% of market rent, and the lowest is the cap target rent at 30% of market rent. We then use a DCF calculator built into our software that will take in a high-level assumption around maintenance, management, lifecycle costs, inflation, so forth, to work out what the estimated capital value for those rental products is. Again, it's the same 10-year headings, but the highest will be the private rented unit, which is in this case 78% of market sale, all the way down to the cap target rent, which is around 18% of market sale, with a graph just showing that spectrum to the right. We then come to the local comparable sales transaction data. So the Vestega Feasibility app will automatically search for nearby sales transactions, typically spanning back the last 3 years, but sometimes we'll go back as far as 5 years if data is sparse in that location. It will collect a mixture of new build data in these purple dots and non-new build data in the orange dots. And again, what the app does is actually kind of equate these orange dots to the purple ones based on new build premiums identified in that location, so that we can use all of these data points to then effectively and accurately estimate what the new build rate for a flat will be in this location. This is the format of the data in kind of scatter plot format, but we also have that in table format down here. So we give you the distance from the site, the postcode, the date, the price, the size, the rate per square meter, whether it's a new build, the type, and whether it's a leasehold or freehold. The I rate, because we do go back a few years to get data, sometimes those sales rates will be out of date. So what we do is we take that base rate and then inflate it based on the land registry property price index. So in this case, for this unit, it was 1.07, which brings you to an index rate of 8,694 pounds per square meter. So that tries to bring that transaction to today's values in an accurate way. That is the flat values tab. We then run a similar tab for the house values. As we mentioned in the previous video, and this is a central location in London, so it'd be very unlikely that you would be running a house-led development in this site. But if you did want to look at the information, you can go through this. But for the purposes of this video, we'll probably skip through that. We then come to the development cost section, which sets out 2 key cost items that would be considered in a site. The first of which, the most important, being the build cost. So the app has a direct connection to the BCIS website through an API. So we bring in the latest build costs for flats, for houses, and for non-residential or mixed commercial build costs in the top here, as well as residential SIL, which is taken from Vestega's own proprietary SIL database. So for BCIS, we provide the mean, the lower quartile, the median, the upper quartile, and the 80th percentile costs for flats, estate housing, and non-residential. The heading we use from the BCIS website is the mixed commercial, with a graphical demonstration of what those rates are over here. We also give you a view of those rates benchmarked across geography. So we look at the United Kingdom rates, the London rates, the Inner London Borough rate, and then the Camden rate, and then compare those in this graph to the right. And then lastly, we have the residential SIL summary. So as I mentioned, Vestega has every single SIL policy that's been adopted by districts collected into a GIS format, so that every site that you run, it will pick up that information if it is adopted. So in this instance, you can see that the recommended local SIL rate is £250 per square meter. Because it's in London, there's also an applicable mayoral SIL rate of £80 per square meter, bringing the total SIL that could be expected to 330. Now, because they have historically adopted dates, that those rates need to get indexed, which comes to £355 per square meter. Now, that is the recommendation used for this site, but we actually have the full policy for SIL for local and mayoral below. So you can see this is the local SIL policy for Camden, was adopted and effective from 2020. The SIL zone is Zone B, based on the site's location. You can see here that residential units greater than 9 is £250 per unit, per square meter. And then actually, if you were to go at 9 or below units, then that rate actually increases to £500 per square meter, indexed to 5,331. We also have these for student housing, extra care, and then other commercial uses that would be set out in Camden's SIL policy, with any uses not listed above at £25 per square meter. And then lastly, again, because this site is in London, there is a mayoral community infrastructure levy. That policy was adopted and effective from 2019. The SIL zone is band 1, so £80 per square meter for all uses except for those listed below. which is development used wholly or mainly for the provision of any medical or health services, and for development used wholly or mainly for the provision of education as a school or college under the Education Acts. So this just gives you a really detailed view of that SIL policy and what that resulting rate is. Next, we're going to go into the flat capacity. So what we do in this tab is we try and work out how many flats could be put on that site based on 3 different methodologies, based on local permissions in the area, plot and height, and p-tile matrix. Now, obviously, the p-tile matrix is only going to be available for sites located within London. So any site chosen outside of London, the p-tile matrix option would not be available. And local permission data is currently only available in London, although we are under works to get local permission data for sites outside of London, and that should be available within a few months. So if we just run through how those permissions work, there's an estimation based on local permissions. So if we just quickly look at the permissions data, so we've plotted this based on units per hectare. So these dots are effectively kind of the density plotted against the site size. And this big purple dot is our algorithm's projection of what the likely density that could be achieved in this site is, which is 250 units per hectare, which equates to 32 units as a median expectation, or 20 to 55, looking at lower and upper expectations. And then we have that permission data in tabular formats that you can sort or search through it to get a better feel for what the permission data is and how it underpins that estimation. There's then an estimation based on the plot size, the footprint ratio, and the height. So we have an algorithm that will work out what the plot ratio is based on the site size. So we think that the footprint to plot ratio is 0.28. We then work out what the building heights is based on EPC information. So you can see our height information below here. Now you can see the heights actually range from 7 stories up to 23 stories in height, which obviously is significantly higher than our estimation of 4. The reason in this instance being that the site is quite small at 0.13 hectares. So our algorithm takes that into consideration. So this actually was a bigger site. We would likely have shown that you could most likely have achieved heights closer to 10, 11, 12, possibly even 23 stories in height. But because of the constraint of the site size, you likely would not be able to get that high. That equates to 19 units on site, or 13 to 26 as a lower and upper expectation. And then lastly, we get to the p-tile density matrix calculation. So this is a formula that effectively takes 2 parameters. It takes the p-tile rate, which, as we found in the site info tab, was 6A. So that would fall into this final column to the right. And it also takes the setting. Now, the setting is a bit more nuanced in that there's a few different variables and definitions that will dictate which setting it is, the most important of which is the proximity to a major town center. And as we mentioned, this site is very close to one, and therefore our algorithm worked out that this is likely a central setting, which means that the p-tile density matrix output would be 650 to 1100 habrooms per hectare, which works out to 40 units on site. So if we go back to the top, we use all 3 of these methodologies to work out that in all likelihood, 27 flats could be feasibly put onto that site. Lastly, we have the affordable policy. So this is another proprietary database that Vestega has developed, which has collected every single affordable housing policy for every district in the country. So we give you the source and location of the policy within the document name, the policy name, the page number, and whether it's based on gross or net additional units. And then we give you the thresholds. So in this instance, anything under 100 square meters is a 0% affordable policy. And then under 25 units, Camden actually has quite a unique policy where it's 2% per unit, which gets you up to 50%. So if you were to do 10 units, for instance, our algorithm would have told you that you actually only needed 20% affordable. But because this is over 25 units, it's 27, it's actually showing that you need 50% affordable. Now, because it's in London, it might align to the London plan, where if 50% is demonstrated unviable or to be unviable, then 35% could be an acceptable provision, given that evidence can be provided that 50% is not able to be provided. So because of that, our algorithm has generated 35% as the provision and taken from our affordable policy mix a 60-40 split. The last section is an affordability tab, which just sets out some of the earning and price data that would influence the affordability of these units in this site location, but does not feed into the overall residual land value. Thank you very much.